perfect person to bring on. Her husband calls her the quality control Nazi or other things like that because she's really, really strict and stiff on making sure the job's done right. So just the perfect person for this. So without any further ado, I'm introducing Marissa Eastep from Easy Stain out of Memphis. Marissa, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Oh, no problem. Hey, everybody.
So Marissa, tell us, why don't you give us a little background for those that don't know? I know most people watching or probably know who we are or who you are from the Facebook groups and stuff like that, but give us a little rundown about your company.
Okay, so our company is Easy Stain. Stephen and I started it a little over 5 years ago, and he's more the face of the company because I'm not usually comfortable in this role, but I'm more the behind the scenes things, the stuff that needs to be taken care of quietly because I'm more reserved. But we started the company as a way to just have a supplement income when he had lost income, and I ran it for a while by myself, and then after his injury, we've run it full time together. This year's a little different because we took on our niece, so I've had to step back a little bit. So I do more of just the behind the scenes work, getting prepped for jobs, picking up stain, things like that. But I still work some, just depends. We've been working on the big subdivision fence, so I've been on that job and just really whatever needs to be done that I can do.
Nice. Yeah. So what I notice about the jobs that you guys post on the internet and show off is they look really, really, really nice. You don't see thin spots on the stain. You don't see, it doesn't look like you guys cut corners. So why don't you tell me about kind of why it's important for you guys to do that quality control and what you do, how you take care of that, because you are the quality control person.
Yes. Well, okay. So one thing that I believe in is we always order more stain than what typical for a job, because I really like a good solid flood. I want to make sure that everything is even. I don't like thin spots. I don't want to see cracks. I don't want to see any of those things. So we more stain than probably the typical person. And I'm okay with that because I would rather use a little more product and have a better quality at the end than, skimp just a little bit to save a little bit of money, but then it's not as good at the end.
Right. Makes sense.
And as far as quality control goes, so I just like making sure that we hit everything, that we protect everything, that there's just no skip steps, because it's really important. You don't want to be called back on a job because every time you're called back, it costs money.
Sure. No, I agree with that. So was it always like this, or is this something that you started doing later? How did you figure out what you wanted on these job sites? And
it was always like that. As far as the stain goes, it was always like that. I'm a big believer in, the flood coat. I really do believe in that. And I understand that with the airless sprayers, it's easier to just skim coat things. But I'm a big believer in flood coating. I put on a coat and then I'll go back and make sure I hit all the knots and all the areas where it's lighter, just because I like a good consistent look to it. So, and it's always been like that.
I agree. I love it. So why don't you give us the basic rundown? I know you kind of already went into that a little bit. What's your basic rundown when let's say your husband's there doing the job, or a crew that you got's there doing a job? When you pull up in front of the house, what are you doing? When you get out, if you're there to check on a job and make sure it's going right, what are you looking for? And what are maybe some things, if you see this, it's a big bad no, and you'd put a stop to it?
Okay, so typically I like to make sure that things like when you open a gate, you make sure you open the gate wide before you leave the job to make sure that every crack is hit, because that is something that when we first started probably got missed a little bit. I like to bend down and get underneath the runners and just make sure those have been hit, because those are really easy to miss. Even with a swivel head and everything on your sprayer, they're still a little easy to miss. I like to double check on cut in. Our children usually do the cut in, and so I like to double check and make sure that's been done. And the protection on things like concrete and things like that, I'm a stickler on that, because you don't want to have to redo somebody's concrete or spend hours cleaning something that you could have just protected pretty easily.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. What tell me more. I mean, what advice, let's say if you were training somebody to do this job or whatever, what advice would you give them? I mean, we can go anywhere with this. If you want to talk about that, or if you would rather talk about why it's important, maybe that's a better topic, why that quality control is important. But tell us what's on your mind.
Well, I think the main thing is understanding what works best for your company. So, how our company functions may not be what's best for your company because
Hmm.
you may not have as many people on the job as we have, or you may have different things. Knowing what you're good at is another thing because so we typically, on a standard, would have 4 people on a job site. So, we would have 2 people spraying if we're doing a fence, and one person that does, making sure our buckets stay full, and one person that does cut ins. We always do the tops of a fence by hand just to make sure they're 100% done if it's trim and cap, because that's something a lot of people miss. And in our weather, our environment, you really need to make sure those are saturated well. So I like to make sure that's done. We do a lot of decks and pergolas, and so how we do them is not always what's best for everybody else. But when there's 4 of us on a job, we do a lot of things by hand on those type of jobs where other people would spray. But I just think the main thing is figuring out what works for you and playing up everybody's best. Like, so if we do a deck, usually my daughter and myself, we do cracks and we do the floors by hand. And I
Right.
could have the 2 of us could have it done in the time that it takes someone else to plastic up and be ready to spray. We're pretty quick at it. So, but we know that. And like I said, there's 4 of us, so it makes a difference. So mainly knowing what your crew is, knowing what job you're going into, it changes from job to job. If we're on a spray job, um, typically Stephen and I spray, or our daughter and Stephen sprays. If we're on a cleaning job, I don't clean anymore because the chemicals just bother my migraines. And so that's typically Stephen and our son. But our son is better at pressure washing than in other areas. So that's it. We just try to play up what we're best at.
Okay. And so tell me, like, what happens if you miss something and you get something bad? Tell us about how you guys would handle a callback or something like that.
We'd always go back and look at it. And in the past, we used to go back and check on every single job about a week or, a few days after, just to double check that everything looked good. We don't do that as much anymore because it's just not feasible all the time. But when you go back, don't have an attitude like, I know I didn't miss anything or I didn't do anything wrong. Try to figure out what happened, be prepared. I mean, sometimes you might miss a cleaning a spot that you had some overspray. So knowing the right products to have with you if you have a mistake is good. Making sure you have stain with you when you go back if they call you back for something and you have stains. That way you're not having to go back 2 or 3 times. And just be prepared that sometimes things do get missed. Even no
Sure.
matter how much you go behind and check and everything, things get missed sometimes. So just be prepared that if someone calls you, you definitely want to go back because you don't want to leave a bad taste in their mouth. You want to have a good name.
Sure. No, that makes sense. When you get finished with a job site, how many walkarounds do you do? Once the job's done and you feel like it's done, is that it? Or do you guys do several walkarounds again after that?
Well, okay. So typically one of us will start walking around before the job ever completely finished, while the
Mhm.
other one's finishing up some last minute, or while maybe whoever's doing the tops of the fence is finishing that up. We'll go look around. We just always double check, especially up near the house, to make sure cut in was done properly, cleanup was done properly. If there's concrete, we make sure we go past that numerous times. If it's a pool, we just double check that. I mean, so the problem areas, we make sure we check 2, 3, 4 times, just depending. And all of us typically go through, at least Stephen, myself, and our daughter goes through and double checks to make sure that we just didn't miss anything. Because while I may not see it one time, he might, or our daughter might, I mean, someone else with different eyes can see things
So
that you don't
lots of,
always see.
yeah, it sounds like you're not, so lots of looking. I guess you guys have been
Yes.
doing it so long, there's not a lot of mistakes that you miss, but lots of looking does expose those if they're there. I like it.
Yes. And we try to make sure that, just because we've been doing it for a while doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. We were doing a job the other day, and so one of the things was from a certain angle, Stephen could see a crack that I couldn't see. So he was like, you need to go back and do that. So I went back and fixed that, and just not being butthurt if someone tells you you missed something.
Yeah. So that's the way it goes. It's sometimes we make mistakes. I remember a stain job. We stained a fence black years ago, and I got a call back, and the lady she was almost embarrassed to call me back. And she said, but I'm calling you because there was a little sliver under the 2x4. And she said, I go for a run every morning. And then when I come home, I sit down on my back deck steps to take my shoes off. And that line is right at her eye level when she sat down on the bottom step. And she said, I've got to get you to fix it. And I was like, well,
It bothered her.
Yeah.
Right.
And I had another one, similar situation. So the guy had a backyard that was up a hill, and he had a swimming pool, and he found a spot that he could see when he was in the deep end of his pool, because he was down looking up at it, and he could see it, and those things do happen. So
they do. And I mean, you can go through and you can try, but sometimes you just miss things. Like if it's getting later in the day and the sun is shining differently than when you're actively spraying, you might not see a shadow, or it looks like a shadow. So you might not see that you've missed some stain underneath the 2x4. So it's just kind of important to do multiple pass throughs.
are you ever squatting down, getting different angles for that?
Oh yeah.
Me too.
Yes.
Yeah. Lay down in the backyard. What are you doing? Well, I'm looking for missed spots. Right.
Yes.
That's
And
it.
when we stain, I'll squat down because right now, because Steven's stain man pole is broken, he stole my swivel head, and we haven't been able to find one in stores. I probably need to order it online. But so when I have to do underneaths, I squat down real low to make sure I spray good underneath. And I try to go back and check myself too, because I mean, I make mistakes. So it's just always good to double check.
That's the way it goes. You want to see if we got any questions?
Sure.
All right, let's see. So everybody, let's say hello on here. Looks like we got a pretty good audience. Let us know where you're from and who you are. We got a Facebook user. We can't see your name because of privacy, but it says howdy. So good evening. We got another Facebook user. Tell us who you are if you don't mind. It says hello. And then we got Truth Seeker. That's Jason from Lewisburg. He's checking in. He's one of our neighbors. Lewisburg, that's down south of both of us. And so here's a question from Joel Velez. How do you guys protect the house next door from overspray if it's, say, 10 feet from the fence?
So if it's real close, we'll spray it with water. Sometimes we have to plastic. Every situation is different. We don't do as much plasticking as some people do because we've just kind of figured out a program that works for us. But we like water and cleanup. That helps, if you spray that from the beginning. And we try to schedule things when it's not super windy, because if it's not super windy, you shouldn't have a whole lot of overspray.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's it. So I guess since you're talking about overspray, are you a nerd like us, and you have a tip, your favorite spray tip?
No, Stephen, I like a wide, I don't even know the actual numbers, he could tell you, but I like a wide tip if we have just a standard fence that's kind of wide open that I can go. But if not, then I think it's like, I don't even know. He could tell you. I know I should know more about the equipment, but he makes my job easy most of the time.
If it's Stephen, it's probably a 521 or a 1223.
I think that's right.
Yeah, so that would be extra wide. So time for questions. If you got any questions, drop them in the comment box. Looks like you have an admirer here. It says she's doing great. Might be Stephen. Maybe he's watching.
He probably is watching.
And so
he knows I get nervous with things like this. So
yeah, we got Jason Putzer from WRS Pressure Washing in North Carolina. Glad you're here. And then we got Gallatin. I bet that's Kelly Richardson. He's a stain contractor up in Gallatin.
Yeah, we know Kelly.
Then we got a She's Awesome from somebody on Facebook. Don't know who that is. but that's it. What would you add to this and say you already talked about the rails. You already talked about, let's talk about if you don't do a good job. So if you don't do a good job, and you don't have good quality control, and maybe this is geared towards an owner operator or somebody who works for a company that's a stain company, what advice would you give them? And how would you talk to them about if you don't take care of your quality control, what does it lead to?
Well, I mean, it's your name tied to it. So we don't really advertise. Most of our stuff is word of mouth anymore. And you won't be in business very long if you don't do a good job. I mean, if you don't take care of your customers, they're not going to be your customers for very long. We have quite a few repeat customers because if you mess up something and you're willing to fix it and you have a humble attitude, they're willing to forgive you and still trust you. If you go in and you try to do a great job from the start and make sure that, you've done your best, then they'll typically be happy with you. If you go in and you try to just skate through a job, if you try to use the minimum product and the minimum amount of effort, you're probably not going to be in business too long.
Okay. Time to flip that light on behind you if you got it there.
Okay, hold on one second.
You got your stage man there for you.
Oh, he went inside, but let me turn it on.
It's getting dark.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, the reason it's getting dark is because I missed our appointment at 4:00, so I apologize for that.
It's all right. I have to sit outside because the baby gets loud sometimes. So
we got James McAuliffe. I hope I got that right, James. But James is stain contractor up north.
Oh, okay.
No question yet. So Mike D'Antonio, he's up in Pennsylvania, I believe, or Philadelphia. He says, "Hi, it's Mike D up in Claymont, Delaware." He's in Delaware. I met him in Richmond. So do you guys try to clean every fence before staining, even newer ones?
No, we don't. So especially with cedar, I don't really find that it's too necessary to clean, new fences. If it's a pine fence that you can see a lot of the pressure treated, the green stuff on it and things like that, then we will, or we'll let it weather longer, just depending on what the person wants. A lot of times people don't want to pay you to clean it when it's brand new. A lot of times people don't want to pay you to clean it when it's not brand new. So they really don't want to pay you when it's brand new. They don't understand that it's necessary.
Right. That makes sense. And oddly enough, we get some people sometimes that want a brand new one cleaned, and you almost can't talk them out of it. It's crazy.
And see, I think it depends on area, just knowing what works in your area with people. A lot of times around here, people don't understand why it's so important to stain. And so getting them to pay for quality work is hard in itself. And so then to add in a cleaning that's not always necessary is really hard. I do understand that it opens up the pores of the wood and it makes it easier to accept the stain, but that's one reason that we just use more product too.
Yeah, that makes sense. So talking about more product, what are your thoughts? I know you don't have to, but what are your thoughts on back brushing? Is it better? What do you think?
Not on a fence. Now, granted, a horizontal, yes, I think back brushing is very important because even though the stain is self-leveling, it seems to just have some runs some here and there, and not really runs, I guess, it just drips after you're done and it doesn't settle the same way sometimes. So on a horizontal, I think it's very important. On a standard fence, we don't.
Yep, I understand.
I think more too, if you also do more of a skim coat, then a back brushing would be necessary, where with a flood coat, it's not so much as necessary.
Got it. All right, here's another comment. It says, yep, leads to a bad name or reputation. I agree with that.
Yes.
And here is Will H. from San Antonio Stain and Seal. He said, we have the crew do the first walkthrough, and then the crew supervisor does the final walkthrough and takes pictures of the completed jobs. I like that process. We need to have Will on here. I think everybody wants to hear from Will. There's James again. He says, charge more to be able to not to rush through jobs. That's key.
Definitely. I mean, you want to make sure that you're making a profit, because otherwise there's no point in being in business. So, make sure you charge enough that you can do quality work.
That's true. James again, he says, if anything, I'll sand the ink stamps and brighten it. So,
Well, see, I'll tell you, we had a deck one time that the woman had, and it's a very, very small deck. And it was more like front steps, not even a deck. But she had 85 of the stamps on her deck, and she asked us to sand them. And so we told her that we would, but unless she didn't want to pay for sanding the whole deck. And so it still made a difference when we stained it. And she went with a very light color, so it stood out like a sore thumb.
yeah. Yeah. So what we would do in that situation is use wood cleaner on it. It's the wood cleaner and get rid of those stamps. Yeah. There's nothing worse than seeing those little stripes everywhere where you sanded the lumber stamps away. So Joel Velez says, you guys still offer a warranty if you don't clean.
We offer a warranty if it doesn't need cleaned, yes. Now, very rarely will we stain a fence that should be cleaned. Like if a person is just adamant they don't want to pay for a cleaning, most of the time we just walk away if it needs cleaned. But we do offer a warranty on our labor. And in 5 years, I think we've only had to do 3 warranty jobs. That's it.
Nice. Nice. There's a nice light. I can see you now.
Yeah, he brought the ring light out here. That's better than the
ring light. Look at there.
Yeah.
It's like you guys got a YouTube studio now. So here's another question for you.
It's for our other business.
Why don't we switch gears and ask about women in the stain business? We don't see a lot of women in this business, I guess, in a lot of the trades. So talk to us about that. How do you guys work together and make that work? And what advantage do you see? Because I see a ton of advantages to having women in the workplace, because they do what they say, they show up, they have empathy, they care about what they're doing. So how does that translate for you, and how have you seen that to be a benefit for you in your business?
Okay, so for us, it can be both a benefit and a downfall, because a lot of times people don't take me seriously as the business owner. Especially because I'm not always the face of the company. So being a woman, they don't think that women do this type of work, that we're into, the hard labor part, because sometimes it can be hard. It's sweaty, it's nasty, and not a lot of women like that part. So, and then we can't always lift everything y'all can. I mean, I'm not a big woman. My daughter's not, she's even smaller than me. So we can't always lift and do everything. So that is a downfall. But then the advantages are, a lot of women, once they see a woman on the job site, they respect that, because they see that, they know that we pay a little bit more attention to detail sometimes than men do. And so people like that fact. Once they see us working, typically people really enjoy having a woman on the job site. They think that it's really cool because it's just not something that you see a whole lot.
Yeah, that makes sense. I would like to have a whole bunch of women running around here. They seem to do a great job.
Yes,
yeah, that's for sure. So we got a comment. Much better. They can see you now.
Sorry.
So, yeah, let's see here. Truth Seeker says, I find women pay more attention to detail. I value that more than strength. I would agree. I would agree with that.
Yes. And like I said, when we do deck jobs, my daughter and I, we sit on the floor and we get in positions that are just easier and different. And we can do a whole deck floor in the time that some people, can plastic up a thing. So we're a little more quicker in some things, like the handwork part. We're a little quicker than the guys. Whereas some of the spraying, Steven's quicker than Ashton. Him and I run about the same. We run about even, except for when he has to do more of the runners and things like that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So Will in San Antonio says women are way more detail oriented. Here's another family business. He says, my wife is the best quality control person we have. Yeah. Ashley, my wife, she was the same way on job sites back in the day. She carried a big stick and used it on me.
Yes, well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. It's because it's Stephen and our children. I don't have any problem putting them, telling them, okay, you missed something. But again, they do it to me too. So having a family business, we all kind of know each other. We know what to look for. Like I know what Stephen might miss, or I know what Ashton or Braden might miss. They know what I might miss because we've been working together for so long.
Yep, I agree. We got another comment here from a Facebook user. No idea who that is. So identify yourself if you don't mind, but it says, what's up? So There it is. The questions keep coming in. Your audience is bigger than Steven's audience when he was on. So I don't know if you wanted to know that or not.
Well, it's just probably because I don't talk as much. So again, people don't put me with the business too much. They put him with it.
Yep. So that's fun. So for those that don't know, Steven was on the show a week or two ago, I guess last week, and talked about it. And that's how this whole thing come to be. So appreciate you coming on. What do you want to add to it or take away from this? Got any questions for the audience or anything like that?
No, I just recommend figuring out your crew and figuring out what works best for you. That's my biggest thing. Don't be afraid to ask questions. But when you ask questions, don't just expect everybody to hand you the answers. Work for some of it too. I love the Stain page because it's so much knowledge and you can ask anything, but I don't like seeing the ones that don't ever want to put in any effort. There's very few of them that don't want to put in any effort. They just want everybody to hand it to them. But as far as the rest of it, I think it's such a great tool, and use it. Use the knowledge that people are offering you and figure out what works for you and do that. You don't have to go with the flow just because it's what everybody else does. I know at the last staining class that we attended in February, we sat down and talked to Mr. Walt. And I love Mr. Walt. He does great jobs. But, and he didn't understand why we did all our pergolas by hand. And I didn't understand how he could spray all of his pergolas. Well, the difference is all of ours have almost tin roof on all of them, where he doesn't have that in his market. So the markets are different. Your crews are different. Everything is different. So you need to figure out what your area, your crew is, and don't be afraid to just play up your best assets.
Yep, I agree with that. It's all different. We need to have more women being active in this stain community, because I think behind just about every guy on this group, there's probably a good woman standing there with his bag. So
yes, I would think so.
We need to bring more ladies out, because there's probably some really, really sick ladies running a lot of these behind the scenes operations that we don't ever hear about.
Probably so.
Yeah,
or at least helping. Even if they don't run it, I'm sure they help.
For sure. Yeah. So James up north asks, what about maintenance plans? Is pricing around the same as original cleaning and staining? He said he started using our stain a couple years ago and hasn't done any maintenance work.
Okay. So we do maintenance plans. At first we started offering, we would do it about 80%, but by the time that the economy has changed now, so it's hard to offer an 80%, price of the original, because everything has gone up. So you're out money if you do that. So typically you kind of just have to charge accordingly to, if your price has changed a lot in those last few years, then you're going to have to up your cost and not be able to give them a maintenance plan discount. Or offer them, even if it's just a small discount, say, okay, this is what it would be. This is what our cost would be now, but we're going to give you a discount on that, not a discount on the original price, because you don't want to lose a bunch of money.
That makes sense. Stephen Eastep says you got that right.
We learned that the last year that you can't originally, when we went to the very first class, not your class, but the very first class we ever went to, they said, maintenance doses should be done at like 80% of the cost. And that's great in theory, but it's not realistic anymore.
Yep. No, I understand. How many years did it take you to feel comfortable with your system or the staining business in general?
Probably like 2-3 years. I mean, most jobs now, we don't freak out when we go on or anything like that. If it's something new, we kind of know how to roll with the punches and everything, where a few years ago, if something unexpected happened, I would definitely be a nervous wreck, always worried about what could go wrong. But now, because we know more, if something goes wrong, we typically know how to fix it.
That makes sense. So if you're watching this and you get nervous on job sites, you're not the only one. That is normal. It happens. So that's the way it goes sometimes. Well, this has been great. It looks like that is the last question or comment. So if you got any more, bring them in here. But Marissa, I really appreciate you coming on and talking. And it says my middle name is worry. Yeah. So there's somebody else saying that they worry about it. Yeah. That's the thing. Quality control and checking things and slowing down and stopping. If it's going bad, you can always stop. So that's a
Yes,
good
and
thing.
reevaluate. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes you have to reevaluate a job. You have a plan when you go in, and then you get there and you find that's not going to work. So you have to stop and reevaluate what you're going to do. And I always worried about things like getting it on the house and stuff like that. So we do a lot of cut in where, we prefer doing more cut in than taping and plasticking, but just the prep work saves the worry.
Yep, that is true. Well, Marissa, it is probably supper time. I know it is at my house, so I really
Getting
appreciate you
close.
coming on here.
Yes.
And
Well, I appreciate it.
yeah, so let's do it again sometimes, but that's it. If they want to find out about you or Easy Stain, Memphis, tell us where they can find you guys and get set up to do a stain job.
We are on Facebook. We don't have a website. We just do everything through Facebook at The Easy Stain. And I think that's what it is, or that's our email. It's Easy Stain 16 on Facebook. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's in
But
I got a link down below for you already.
okay. Yes. And then we have builders that we follow behind, and they always pass on our name too, because we make sure that we have good builders. We don't want to go behind people that don't do a good job, because then they think we won't do a good job. So
That makes sense. That makes sense. Awesome. Marissa, thank you so much. I will let you get back to your family.
all right. You have a good day.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye. Okay. Bye.
There you have it. Another lady in the staining business. So if there's any other ladies watching, I wish you would come on the show and talk about how you guys do your business. So Will, you and your wife maybe can come see us on the podcast sometimes. But that's it. Easy Stain of Memphis. Look them up. They're the premier stain company in Memphis, and they do a great job. And if you want to find out more about the group she talked about, it's in the comments below. Staining University Facebook page. And again, this episode was brought to you by, where is it? Expert Stain and Seal. So if you need stains and sealers, check out the Expert Stain Shop, guys. Thanks and have a great night.